Howdy, Year 9 historians. We continue our journey of learning about World War One. Today we're going to talk about the Western Front. Okay, today's learning goals are: you're going to know about the major battles of World War One, well, the ones on the Western Front, and you're going to know how the Allies won World War One. Now, I haven't put an activity in today because there's a fair chunk of notes. So, anyway, it's all good stuff though. Okay, the battles in France. So after Gallipoli, the Anzacs, the Australian New Zealand Army Corps, that's what Anzac stands for, went back to Egypt and were joined by fresh troops. Some stayed to fight against the Turks in the desert, but most went to France to fight on the Western Front. As we know, the Western Front was the main site of trench warfare, and it was that 500-mile stretch from the Swiss Alps to the Belgian coast, along the border of France and Germany. The Battle of the Somme in northern France was on the 1st of July 1916. A horrendous battle. 57,000 soldiers were killed or wounded on the first day alone. Crazy times. By the end of the battle, no one had won. So all that death and destruction, basically for nothing. Germany lost, all up, Germany lost almost 500,000 men. France lost 200,000 and Britain 420,000. So we're talking some seriously big numbers. That's over 1 million people in the Battle of the Somme. Never happened before. Right, so just want to highlight exactly where some of the battles that we're talking about are. Yeah, so can you see? There's the Battle of the Marne. Somme was along here somewhere. Along here somewhere. Battle of Verdun, Battle of Ypres. The only real important naval battle of World War One was the Battle of Jutland. It was here. More battles in France. Now I'm just giving you a summary of some of the ones with the biggest death tolls. Yeah, we could spend an entire year just talking about all the battles in World War One, but we're not going to. Okay, other major battles on the Western Front include the Battle of Verdun, 300,000 dead, shocking. The Third Battle of Ypres, that's pronounced Ypres, not Wipers, although the Allied troops did pronounce it Wipers because they didn't know how to pronounce Belgian words, or Passchendaele. Same name, and there was between 400 and 800,000 casualties. Madness. And the Second Battle of the Marne, where there were 260,000 casualties. All very horrendous. Here are some primary source photos from some of these battles. So here you see all the soldiers when they're hanging out, they've got their guns all put up like that so they don't accidentally shoot anybody, and it's easy for everybody to grab their guns at once. And along here you can see all of the reinforcements coming along. This is what you'd call going over the top. So here you've got a trench down the bottom and the soldiers are advancing up over the top into this stuff here, which is called no man's land, where there's a whole heap of barbed wire and just dead bodies. It's pretty freaky. And here, a few different photos. So on the left you got a guy who's pretty much in the middle of getting shot. That's a pretty cool action shot. Well, not cool, a bit morbid. And then on the top right you've got men in the trenches running along to go over the top, and then on the bottom right hand you've got the going over the top. That highly recommend you check out the trailer for the movie 1917. Came out quite recently. Some really amazing cinematography, and it really shows you what it was like to be a grunt on the front lines. Finally, the war did end in 1918 on the 11th of November. The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. 11 AM on the 11th of November. There you go. In 1918, the war on the Eastern Front had ended. The Russians became communists and surrendered. Halfway through, so remember there's kind of two big fronts going on there, yeah? You got the Western Front, which is trench warfare, the border between Germany and France, or Australia for the Eastern Front. There was a lot more movement. But then halfway through, or towards the end of World War One, the Russians had a communist revolution. Communists took over the government, and they said, we don't want to be a part of this war. So they basically said, you can have all that land, we don't care. And they exited the war. And so the war on the Eastern Front ended. So this meant that the Germans had way more troops to put onto the Western Front. They didn't need to put any troops into fighting on the Eastern Front against the Russians because they surrendered. And so they committed all those troops to the Western Front, which was bad news for the Australian troops who were there. This is a photo of the Germans coming off the train carriage where they had to sign the surrender. Interestingly enough, when Hitler in World War II defeated France, he made the French leaders get on that exact same train, go to the exact same spot in this forest just outside of Paris, and sign the French surrender against the Germans. But remember, this is World War One, so these are the Germans surrendering. Yeah, Hitler was very bitter. Right, so the Germans had all of those extra troops because the Eastern Front was over because the Russians had surrendered because they had turned communist and were not interested in a war. So the Germans made one last push on the Western Front. But the Allies were joined by the USA, so just in time, the Allies rock up, the US troops rock up, and they started sending, like 100,000 soldiers a month over, and that helped to defeat Germany. The Australians also helped to turn back the Germans by defending the French village of Villers-Bretonneux. That might be spelt wrong. Anyway, and the people of that French village are still very thankful to Australia. There's quite a few exchanges that go on between that village and Australia. So there you go. And look, every major newspaper in the world reported something about it. This is how it went down. Armistice is signed. Armistice means the end of the war, yeah. When combatants in a war decide to end it all. So there you go. Germany signed the armistice at 5 o'clock this morning, Paris time. Hostilities ceased at 11 o'clock Paris time. Complete surrender by Germany. Okay, awesome video to watch here. This is a summary of World War One from Geohistory. It's great.
100 years ago ended a war whose intensity and scale the world had never before seen. A war that involved more than 60 million soldiers around the globe. In this video, we retrace the origins, events, and consequences of World War I. To understand the origins of World War I, we start in 1871 at the end of the Franco-German War between the French Empire and the Confederation of North Germany, allied with the German states of the South. After 6 months of fighting, France is defeated and the victors unite to form the German Empire. Alsace and Moselle are annexed to the new empire, frustrating the French side. In the following years, Germany would greatly advance its industry and economy. The country also builds alliances, first with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and then with Italy, which is frustrated by France colonizing Tunisia. The three form the Triplice or Triple Alliance. Growing in power and status, Germany begins colonizing African territories. For its part, France allies with the Russian Empire and signs a secret pact of non-aggression with Italy, thus avoiding a second front in case of war. The British Empire fears the rise of the German army, more specifically of its navy. Britain comes out of isolation, moves closer to France and then to Russia. Together, they form the Triple Entente. In the Balkans, the Austro-Hungarian Empire annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina, much to the displeasure of neighboring Serbia, which dreamed of one day uniting the South Slav people. This project appeals to Russia, which diplomatically allies itself with Serbia. On June 29, 1914, a young Serbian nationalist from Bosnia murders the heir to the throne of Austria and his wife in Sarajevo. Austria-Hungary accuses Serbia of having organized the attack and, despite Russian threats, declares war the following month. In a few days, the conflict spreads between the countries of the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. Only Italy remains neutral for the moment. The German plan is to overcome the French army concentrated in the east by planning an attack from the north. To achieve this, Germany invades Luxembourg and Belgium in violation of their neutrality in the conflicts. The French, British and Belgian armies are forced to retreat. Fearing the capture of Paris, the French government moves to Bordeaux, but the German army turns away from the city to continue surrounding the French army. They are then attacked on the flanks by the Army of Paris, which forces them to retreat further north, marking the failure of the Schlieffen Plan. The new German objective is to take over the strategic ports of Calais, Dunkirk and Boulogne to cut British supplies. The inferior Belgian army cannot resist the German advance. In the plain of Yser, the choice is then made to open lock gates to flood the polders. With the German army stopped in their tracks, the front line is edged out with the construction of 700 kilometers of trenches, stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. With the war front lines stabilized in the west, Germany sent its troops to the east to fight against a Russian offensive, which puts pressure on Austria-Hungary. After some hesitation, the Ottoman Empire decides to support Germany in the war. This creates several new fronts, one in the Caucasus, another in the Sinai against the British Protectorate in Egypt with the goal of controlling the Suez Canal, and finally a third front in the British Protectorate of Kuwait over the issue of oil resources. To weaken the Ottoman Empire, Britain supports an Arab rebellion by promising them independence in liberated lands. Finally, Italy declares war on Austria-Hungary with the hope of gaining new territory. In Asia, Japan went to war against Germany and seized its colonies in the Pacific and China. In Africa, German colonies are stormed by French, British and Belgian forces. Many people from colonized territories are enlisted in European armies. France mobilizes nearly 800,000 people, a large proportion of whom are sent to Europe. The British Empire, for its part, enlists 2.7 million men from its dominions and colonies. More than half come from British India. In the Balkans, Bulgaria goes back to war alongside the Central Empires. The country has a great territorial appetite and wants to expand in all directions. Serbia is attacked on two fronts and is quickly invaded. In the West, Germany continues with military innovations. It becomes the first to organize aerial bombardments carried out by Zeppelin airships. London and Paris are regularly attacked. The Air Force is initially used for tracking and reconnaissance, but planes are quickly fitted out with machine guns, resulting in the first aerial battles. In another first, Germany launches submarine wars in British territorial waters, sinking ships it encounters. Finally, in the trenches, both sides use toxic gases that cause many casualties. Despite some attempts to find breakthroughs, the front lines of war remain fixed, at great human cost. In the trenches, soldiers who survive the fighting are forced to live in harsh conditions. Mud, vermin, rats, and the smell of decaying corpses put their nerves to the test. In the spring, the French side begins mutinies that would be suppressed. Germany also tires of the stalemate. The country is now focused on war on the economic front and sends its submarines to the Atlantic to sink all kinds of ships, even commercial ones, heading to the United Kingdom. Exhausted by war, Russia suffers more than 1.7 million military casualties. Morale is at its lowest point on the front lines and among the public. Then takes place a short revolution that brings down the regime of the Tsars. At the same time, the United States of America finds itself becoming a victim of the commercial blockade in the Atlantic. They decide to go to war alongside the Allies. In Russia, a second revolution allows the Bolsheviks to come to power, who immediately sign a ceasefire with the Central Empires. With the Russian front under control, Germany concentrates its troops on the west. The country succeeds in a breakthrough in the trenches and approaches Paris, which it bombards. But the German army moves too fast to the south. The French army counterattacks and disintegrates German defenses. In panic, German soldiers retreat to the north. From this moment, the Allies lead on all fronts. In Germany, mutinies and a revolutionary wave force the emperor to abdicate and allows the signing of the armistice, marking the end of the Great War that kills more than 18 million people. On June 28, 1919, a peace treaty is signed at Versailles. German representatives are not invited, and the country is forced to accept all demands of the victors. Germany and its allies are held solely responsible for war damages and must pay heavy compensation. Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman empires are dismantled, making way for new countries or colonies. Germany, meanwhile, finds itself humiliated and indebted. Its army is disbanded and colonies shared among the allies. The country cedes roughly 15% of its territory to France, Belgium, Denmark and Poland, which is recreated. The only consolation is Germany remains largely intact due to no fighting on its territory, and its industry is still standing. The humiliation imposed upon Germany already leaves it with a desire for revenge.
Today's reflection activity is I want you to give a sentence, a phrase and a word for the topic World War I. So summarize World War I in one sentence, then in one phrase. A phrase is just a part of a sentence, like fancy pants. That's a phrase, it's not a whole sentence. That would not be a phrase to describe World War I, of course. And then a word. Yeah, so you're summarizing World War I into one sentence, then into one phrase, and then into one word. Have fun with that. Homework. Yay. Gotta love it. You're going to complete an online quiz. So go there, bit.ly/the war quiz. Just keep doing that until you can get 100% on it. It's a content quiz on all the stuff that we've been doing over the last few lessons. Some of you are keen bean machines and need a little bit more homework. So here are some. Read chapter 8.8 from the Jacaranda History Alive 9 textbook, and also check out this video. This is a video from Crash Course European History as read by John Green. It's a really great series, and this is about World War I battlefields, so there's a link to it. bit.ly/Great War 2020. Thank you so much for participating in this lesson, and as always, time to keep it real.